Sometimes FinOps people like to be command and control, and sometimes it's more about being an enabler. We just need to enable teams to kind of utilize new technology and figure out what that return on their investment is. So sometimes it's not about controlling those costs. It's about enabling people to understand the data behind the money that they're spending and the business value that's hopefully driving for their organization.
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. I'm really excited about the episode today because we have here someone with tons of FinOps experience. He actually comes from engineering background, but from there, he moved to FinOps. Today, he supports a company with billions of dollars in revenue. He supports hundreds of millions in cloud commitments and generates annually $100 million in cloud savings through FinOps initiatives. What crazy numbers. I'm happy to welcome Head of FinOps and Cloud Platforms at Splunk, Zach Johnson. Zach, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on. As a listener, it's great to, finally get to become a guest.
Absolutely. And I'm always happy to welcome our listeners as guests. It's an amazing feeling and great to see how people are getting more acquainted with the podcast. So, Zach, please share with me. You have so much experience, but I'm sure that when you started your FinOps career, there were things you did wrong. What is the one thing that you feel you got wrong when you started your FinOps career?
Sure, that's a great question. I think that's something, everybody can look back and reflect on no matter how long you've been on your FinOps journey. So I think the biggest thing I got wrong is I thought that presenting data and presenting a problem was the same thing as solving it, right? I think we beat people over to death with dashboards and reports and just hundreds and hundreds of optimization, opportunities. So I think that's the biggest thing I got wrong is I thought I'd make a bunch of fancy dashboards, a lot of great reporting, and just sending people just mountains of data and alerts would magically solve all my FinOps problem. And I got that, really wrong, for a number of reasons, not only at the engineering level, but all the way to the executive level. It's just definitely something I got wrong, and I've been able to, build on every year in my career since I've been in FinOps.
So how do you look at it today? So it's not about presenting the data and the problems. What else you need to do as a FinOps leader?
Yeah, so I think it's finding the right metrics to the audience that you're presenting on. If you're presenting to the C-suite, they're probably not going to care about tagging compliance, but they're going to care a lot about the percent of unallocated spend in their environment. If they can't attribute, that spend to a business unit, a business service, a business entity, whatever you call it, that's a major problem for them. And I think the second thing is connecting business value to every action that you're taking, whether it's helping companies increase their margin, or whether you're talking about they've got 50 hours of developer time to spend in a sprint. What makes the most sense to return the most value to the business? In FinOps, we certainly care very much about our remit of saving money, but we don't really. A lot of people don't stop and take what that full picture looks like, right? They could be spending time on developing new features that brings in a lot more revenue than spending time on cleaning up resources or idle waste in their environments. So it's really about balancing, your priorities with the business priorities and come to kind of an alignment on what's going to return the most value for that business unit, that product, or that service.
Yeah, wow, I have so many questions on what you said right now, but let's take it one by one. First of all, business value. Let's open it up because a lot of people bring this topic to the podcast, and I think there is a lot in there. So when you say business value, does that mean like showing what revenue is generated from this spend, or it's also about other type of value? For example, um, this new feature or new model is helping us with retention, helping us with position ourselves as innovative. So Do you go to revenue or you go beyond to other value you're getting from the cloud investment?
Yeah, I think, we're a SaaS company, the company I work at. So, margin is always the most important thing for us. But I think it's important to realize that it can go beyond revenue, and sometimes FinOps people like to be command and control, and sometimes it's more about being an enabler in a situation like the race to AI, right? So every company wants to enable AI. They want to use AI. It's the hottest thing on the market right now. So sometimes it's more about how do we enable the right dashboards and data sources to show where we're spending our time in money in AI, and rather than tie it to like what are you actually getting on your return for AI. So sometimes it's we don't yet understand that return on investment. So we just need to enable teams to kind of utilize new technology and figure out what that return on their investment is. So sometimes it's not about controlling those costs. It's about enabling people to understand the data behind the money that they're spending and the business value that that's hopefully driving for their organization.
And that's a really interesting insight. So you're basically talking about, hey, I can also show the organization that our investment goes on innovation and that we're actually investing in AI, which is something that is a strategic initiative in the company. When you go to the executives you talked about earlier and you don't talk to them about tagging compliance, okay, I get that. Do you also share with them, hey, look, we're investing more in AI now thanks to reallocating a budget or reallocating spend to AI services or infrastructure?
Yeah, and we also try to go a layer deeper, right? You're enabling with your development teams with maybe AI-enabled IDEs or code generation. So you think that's great, but how does that attribute itself to business value? Are we seeing more commits, more features? Are we seeing less errors in our code, less pipeline failures because our code is better and hopefully our velocity is getting better? So we try and take it a layer deep beyond just reporting, we're spending X dollars per engineer, trying to connect it to that next layer of business context that we spent X dollars per engineer on these code generation or optimization tools, but we're actually getting in return features out to our customers quicker. Our pipelines are failing less because our code is cleaner and developers are able to commit, make more commits and less time in between those commits because they're accelerated by those AI tools. So just showing the cost you're spending per engineer on a tool like that doesn't really connect to that second layer of business context, which is really the most important thing to any kind of leadership or
Yeah,
executive team.
that's great. And when we're talking about what's interesting for executives, do you find executive care about optimization? Do you share the optimization efforts? How much was saved? Is that part of your presentation?
Yeah, we certainly, share that, but I think the element they care about the bottom line, they care about their gross margin and how it affects the goals that they have to, report up to the board. So I think that's a, interesting when, those I think KPIs are constantly changing, but you can't present every KPI to every team you present to. So you really got to find the ones that hit home, best for them. And it's really things like what's my unallocated spend? How does this affect my cloud gross margin? And I think this maybe the tertiary thing is it's you explain to them we did all these optimization efforts, but spend went up in the cloud. So how do you separate out your customer growth, your business as usual, your expansions into new regions to serve your customers from like the savings that you actually achieve. So one thing we really like to focus on is anytime there's a cost optimization opportunity or we're rolling out a new feature or expanding to a new region, we have a separate dedicated tracking program with lots of great automated dashboards and Slack integration that can tell people and extrapolate that out from just normal growth or customer acquisition and show that this is the cost that was driven up by this new feature, or this was the cost that was saved by an optimization project or opportunity.
Very interesting. And it's also very clear that your executive team is focused on gross margins. I think it is important to mention you're a SaaS company. So obviously the cloud spend is part of your gross margins. Like the bigger the spend, the lower the margins are. And it actually tied back to what you said about business context, because if you're now working for a company who's not a SaaS company, cloud is used for IT, for example, but not for your product that you sell to your customers, then suddenly gross margins are not relevant and you have to focus on different things. So it is actually very interesting to see how the business context actually influence on your work as a FinOps person. So that's really great. And Zach, I have to, like you said, something very specific. Some would say tactical, but it is interesting for me. You mentioned that you have in place Slack messages that are being sent. I think generally Slack is an amazing tool to engage with engineers. And I wonder what use are you doing in Slack to communicate with engineers or maybe with other personas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we try to meet our customers or clients, however you want to describe it, internal business, customers where they are. And for Splunk, they're at Slack. That's where they live and do a lot of their daily, activities. And so what we really try and do is come up with programs that monthly, weekly, whatever the cadence that serves them best through several different levels, right? Executives care a lot less about finite details than maybe a service or product owner. So we've custom built reports or Slack notifications that come through that really explain, depending on what level you are in the business, and those metrics look certainly different depending on what level you aren't. It helps kind of track, did my cloud spend go up? Did it go down? How is it trending compared to last month? And then, can kind of separate, I grew by compute, I grew by storage, I grew by network traffic. And as we've enhanced that program, certain business units really are into unit economics. Now, what does it cost for me to ingest a gigabyte of data? What does it cost to me to, service one customer? And so once you get that unit economics in there, it really can help highlight to your leadership team or people who are watching those metrics that, with business growth, hopefully our unit economics stay flat or they're going down with economies of scale, with shared services, with resource and rate optimization. So, those are things that are kind of more that second level context that we talked about. And kind of with AI on the horizon, we've been working internally to generate AI insights. Because the next question we get, typically a lot of these reports or alerts go out, is okay, that's great. I saw my costs go up or down, but let's dig into what actually caused it. And so with AI-based insights, we can now develop to our leadership, your cost went up because we expanded out to this region to serve new customers, or there was an optimization project that went out that, shrunk our storage costs. So we try and, meet customers where they are and try and anticipate what questions they would ask and answer them for them right there without them having to come back, pull an engineer off another task, dig into the problem, and give them those insights that we're able to generate with AI.
Well, there's so much in there, what you said right now. And I really find fascinating the fact that, you talked about unit economics and you mentioned that for some people in your organization, it's very important to understand how much it costs to ingest gigabyte of data. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The reason is because that, like, part of your business model is to price based on gigabyte ingested. So that's like how you tie the business context to the type of metrics and data you deliver to your engineers. Is that correct?
Excellent question. So I think, yeah, unit economics helps us extrapolate out like customer growth from normal business activities. That way, unit economics tells you the true story of what's really
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. And another fascinating point that is also tied back to how you show business value is when you talked about new regions. So very often, new regions in AWS, for example, or in any cloud provider are associated with extra costs because other regions are more expensive than others because it can create data cross-regional data transfer costs that also cost more. But the other side of it is that it unlocks new markets. So do you actually, when you talk about, hey, spend went up because we open new region, Do you also tell, hey, but the flip side is that we got into a new market and now we also have more revenues from that market? Is that a kind of breakdown that you also share with the executive team?
Yeah, we certainly want to understand, do we have enough revenue to support going into that region? Do we have enough customers, right? And so at the end of the day, it's not always about revenue, it's about serving your customer. So in an ideal business case, right, you have more revenue in that new region than you're spending to run that region. But sometimes it's about capturing new customers, capturing new market, rolling out new features, and hopefully, we're a publicly traded company, so trying to maximize on shareholder wealth. So sometimes it's not always about revenue. Sometimes it's about market share. It's about gaining customers, about meeting our customers where they are, and then the revenue will eventually be there to support it. But in an ideal scenario, right, there is more revenue in that region than what you're spending to run that region.
Got it. And Zach, I want to take you to the beginning of the podcast. You said that the one thing you got wrong is that you thought that you would put the data in front of the people, and that is solving the problem. Now, obviously, that's not the situation. That's not the reality. The reality is more complex. And it takes me to something you told me in the past that really stuck with me. And that is that you feel that you need to turn FinOps into a core part of the organization operating system. I think it's more or less a quote of what you told me. And I wonder what it means to you, this sentence, and whether or not you have like a tactic or two that you have in place to make it happen that you can share with us.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I think whether it's FinOps, whether it's engineering, cloud platforms, cloud security, I think one area of the business a lot of people underestimate is the relationship aspect, right? A terrible engineer with fantastic people skills can oftentimes make a lot more progress than a fantastic engineer with just horrific business skills or people skills. So the biggest thing or tool I found to be effective is launching monthly business reviews with your business units, entities, service products, however you call it in your organization. And I'm happy to walk you through what that looks like, because that kind of connects the stakeholders between the business, finance, engineering. And security can be in these business reviews, but we're really only focused on the FinOps aspect of it. And I'm happy to walk you through kind of what that process looks like in an ideal world. So typically it should happen, every month. I don't think, be super worthwhile to have a bigger cadence than that, but it can certainly be something that's quarterly, depending on your organization. Like the first thing is, kind of going through your welcomes, setting the objectives, and it's basically what are the key takeaways from the last one? What are the highlights? So start off by rewarding all the engineers or people from finance or people from the product who have done great work, right? And then I want to get context from the business unit or product leaders. What are their current priorities? What are their revenue goals? Try and figure out how do I tie the cloud cost or FinAx activities to their business drivers, right? And so once we kind of understand that, we can kind of start to talk through what KPIs or anomalies do we need to review to kind of get through that. And so, you kind of walk through your normal metrics, revenue up, revenue down, cloud spend up, cloud spend down. Maybe your savings plan coverage, your tagging compliance. Every company's got different metrics that really, hit that business driver, but those are typically ones most companies have. So once you have those, you've kind of talked about what you did the last month, what you want to do this month, and then kind of present to them, these are the savings we realized last month with activities. These are our new resource or service optimization opportunities or blockers that are preventing us from doing it. So you've presented those opportunities, and then you can start to talk through the business on what makes sense to prioritize this month, the next couple of sprints, right? That way we're both mutually invested. Maybe the FinOps team is there to optimize the rate, and maybe the engineering or product team is there to kind of optimize the environment or the architecture or the resources. They're kind of an agree on something mutually agreed that we're all going to focus on this month, and then kind of match it to what cloud demand is coming in, so we can get ahead of those potential spikes or savings. Because in FinOps, any hour, minute, day where there's on-demand spend, running, we're spending more money than we want to in the cloud. So the earlier we know about it and we know it's going to persist, it's a lot easier for FinOps to be there maybe a little bit more proactively than reactively. Because I think a lot of FinOps organizations are very reactive in nature. So if I can switch that to being proactive, it shrinks the amount of on-demand spend I have, and it shrinks the amount of unoptimized resources I have. And so the sooner you can catch it, the more money we're going to actually save. And then we kind of close up the meeting with decisions, action item owners, timelines, and then the expected business benefits of doing those with everybody agreed on priority. That way, when it's time to do all that, everybody understands, product agrees, business agrees, engineering agrees, and finance agrees. Because oftentimes finance will have a better idea on your total cost of ownership and where teams need to focus to kind of get to those goals that finance sets that's maybe a little bit outside the business.
That's an amazing agenda, Zach, and I actually encourage you to write it down into an article. But now we're on a podcast, so we're in a different format. And what I'm curious about right now is who should be on these calls, on these business reviews. So you mentioned engineering, finance, anyone specific from these teams? Should we have product managers there? Anyone else?
Yeah, so I try and feel like everybody has a seat at the table, but for these, I try and have the people that can make decisions on priorities, remove blockers, make those choices of where we're going to focus, and understand the business context and trade-offs of doing it or not doing it. So typically, do they have a financial analyst that's assigned to that product or that business unit, business entity? Is there anybody else from finance that we conclude? Is there a product owner, product manager? Do they have a scrum master who kind of helps the team set those priorities and through those different scrum ceremonies? It's important so that they're included. And then somebody who understands the technical construct of what needs to be done. So I think another area where FinOps has come up short is a lot of time, business teams or finance people coming to engineering people with what problems look easy on paper but are a very, very thorny technical problem to solve. So it's always important to, I think, to have that engineering context and layer so they can actually translate what does that actually mean for technical investment, because something can look super easy on paper but it can be very technically complex or fraught with risk to actually accomplish it in production.
Okay, that's great. And Zach, from your experience, who should drive these meetings? Like, who should lead these meetings? Do you feel like you should be the one leading it, or actually no? Maybe let the engineering leader to lead the conversation. What's your approach for that?
Yeah, so I kind of approached everything in FinOps and cloud platforms as I'm here as a party of enablement, right? It's the opposite from old school IT in the early 2000s, which was definitely a party of command and control. And I kind of flipped it to where how can I enable you to get there? So whether it's FinOps, whether it's the business unit, whether it's finance, I don't think it really matters who drives it as long as you have that meeting and those right parties investment. So I'm happy to be a passenger. I'm also happy to drive the bus. Whatever it gets us there, you just check your ego out of the situation. And, if it's easier to get there as a passenger on the bus, that's totally fine. And sometimes it's easier if you drive the bus because you know who needs to be on the bus and where you need to go.
Amazing. And I love the humility message that comes with it, honestly. And do you have like a certain template that you share with the engineering team with the structure of the agenda?
Yeah, we typically kind of run it through your normal, kind of mini project management tools like your Jira, your Confluence, your ServiceNow. So it's about meeting the people where they're at. If they operate and spend all their time in Jira, that's where we're gonna meet them. We're not gonna force them into using a tool that, we use or we're familiar with. So it's kind of all about meeting them where they are because then it's more of a partnership rather than a forced activity that they have to do.
Gotcha. And Zach, the one thing I did not see or hear on the agenda is rate optimization. I would assume it is because you're managing it from the centralized FinOps team.
Yeah, so FinOps team, at least in my work, kind of centrally manages kind of rate optimization. We've got some amazing dashboards built on Splunk technology that we use that really tell us exactly where we need to invest. That's given us the most bang for our buck, right? But really, rate optimization starts before there. You start spending $1 million a year in the cloud, you're eligible, at least through AWS, for a PPA or EDP. So start there, right? You get savings. You don't have to optimize any savings plans. You don't have to optimize any resources. You get that savings, and the more you spend with a cloud provider, the more they should hopefully return from you from a top line discount. So once you get that, then you can start focusing on commitment-based rate optimization, reserved instances, savings plans, whether it's compute or instance savings plans.
Very nice. And I love it that you built commitments dashboard on top of Splunk technology. Listen, Zach, maybe Splunk can start selling commitment management solutions.
Yeah, as long as I get a cut, we like to say we drink our own champagne rather than we eat our own dog food because like most companies, we believe in the product that we sell. So if we don't use it in house, it's not going to really inspire any confidence to outside people.
Very nice. Cool. And tough question to you, Zach. For a company like Splunk, because I know it's not the same for every company, but for a company like Splunk, where do you think the FinOps team should focus more? Rate optimization or usage optimization?
Yeah, so I mean, ideally, there is a world where you certainly do both, right? And so I think the larger the cloud spend you have, the more rate optimization is just something that's far easier to achieve, and it brings you an exponentially better return, right? Optimizing your commitments in your rate is going to return you 20 to 40-ish percent versus, you're lucky if you get a few percent to 5 to 10, optimizing on resource. And if your architecture is, sound, it becomes less of a problem. So hopefully you've got great internal architecture teams that make that problem of resource optimization much smaller. But I think rate optimization is something you can do without a change cab, without having to prioritize with engineering teams, without having long testing cycles and maybe development and staging before you roll out to production. There's very little, if any, risk to my customers or downtime. So there's just a lot of factors at bigger companies that kind of, add up to where rate optimization is important. It's not to say that resource optimization isn't important or isn't valuable or doesn't have a lot of areas of return. But if you're talking about where human beings can invest their hours, they're far better spent on rate optimization versus an automation tool is really the perfect tool to go chase people or automatically remediate it than it would be rate optimization. Automatic rate optimization purchasing tools make me very, very nervous. For resource optimization tools, a lot less.
Yes. And I would also guess, like, I think you have a pretty decent team. And when you have a team that can, work on commitments and really fine tune it, you can also achieve better results than an automated solution just because it's a lot more customized and tailor made to your own needs. Is that your perspective as well?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at like, effective savings rate is maybe a really good metric to judge. Am I getting a really good rate of return purely or mostly focusing on rate optimization? If your metric is kind of at the industry average or above, the answer to that question is yes. But every company is certainly different. In companies that are maybe 400 or 500 small products broken out into various business units, maybe resource optimization is better served because the centraling purchasing of that doesn't return as much value.
Yes. And Zach, would that be accurate to say that part of the reason that you put more focus on rate optimization is because that Splunk as a company provide data infrastructure that has to be ultra, ultra, ultra available and reliable. So the ability to drive changes to infrastructure is a lot harder.
I think that's a fair question. I think one thing we're super committed to, like you said, is super high uptime, and part of that is a new, I don't know, instance or family comes out from a cloud provider. We can't just go turn it on in production, right? We need a very stringent and rigid testing process to make sure our product performs just as good on the next generation of an instance family as the last generation, and not to mention availability. People assume cloud providers have unlimited availability, unlimited scale. Kind of that was the big promise, right? Moving to the cloud, not necessarily you'd save money, but you're basically uncapped for resource availability. That's just not the case for most cloud providers, for companies that are doing things at scale. So just because something is new doesn't mean we can immediately roll to it, because there's a long testing product, and we have to wait for the cloud providers to have enough capacity. So when we want to, take advantage of something that's got a better price performance ratio, we've got a lot of business activities we need to take care of before we do that. So it's important that internally, FinOps stays connected to the teams internally that do that kind of testing and that validation. And then we have a relationship to let them know, maybe we can try a next generation of this instance family when you've got time to put it in your testing cycle and validate that it's right for our customers.
Interesting. And Zach, we mentioned your team. So can you share with us maybe how big is your team and what are the different roles you have on the team?
Sure. So yeah, my FinOps team is 7 people distributed across the United States, and so I've got 3 full-time FinOps engineers. I've got 3 full-time more traditional engineers, and then I've got one data scientist who brings crazy math stuff to help us make really effective choices in the cloud, solve thorny mathematical problems, model out lots of different scenarios. So I'm really lucky to have a diverse group of really capable and exceptional people on my team. So it's really great to have that diverse amount of people with different skill sets that all kind of add up together to make what I think is a really solid team.
That's very interesting. Can you share with us some of the use cases that the data scientist is tackling?
Sure. So I think the biggest question a lot of people have when making them like a commitment purchase is, where's this commitment purchase going to go in our organization? What it's going to cover, right? The cloud providers will tell you, well, it'll cover the instances that need it most. We can't really tell you what those are going to be, where they're going to be, until you actually purchase it. So, this person was able to kind of model out a tool that will tell us if we purchase X amount of dollars in a commitment, it's going to cover these resources in this area. And it can even give us recommendations that typically align with what the cloud provider says, but the cloud provider doesn't always have like seasonal context or things that, this person can add into the model that helps us, make choices. Another area is how stable is spend in environments. If you're looking to make a commitment purchase, you only want to purchase in areas with stable spend. If it's high, low, you don't want to purchase it at the high watermark, so you're having unused commitments. So it can also help model situations like that to tell us how stable is spend, and then that way the FinOps practitioner can kind of have a red, yellow, green on how confident or capable they feel like this purchase is going to be. So a green light, super stable spend, it's been very stable, so we know it's probably pretty good to just go and purchase it, whatever the tool or the cloud provider is telling you to purchase. And things that have a lot of variability, it's more of a red light. We have to have a business conversation on what's driving that up and down, and where good looks like to make that purchase. So I never thought, in a million years in high school or college, I would be involved with anything mathematical at all in my career. And here I am loving like the thorny math problems behind, all these choices we make in FinOps. It's a weird world.
Wow. And now I'm even more confident that Splunk can sell your commitment solution. Maybe you'll get out with a new line of business for Splunk from this episode. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one last question, if I may. The software developers on your team, what are they focused on?
Yeah, so they're focused on, getting data out of our cloud platforms into our cloud costing tool, into data warehouses. They're focused on building that automation between cloud providers, our cloud cost tooling, and tools like Slack. They're worried about pushing data, so we've got lots of self-service dashboards. They're there to assist us in getting kind of the roles and permissions we need to collect cloud, data and metrics. They're there to, work with Kubernetes teams to be sure we can pull data out of that environment, push it into a central tool. And they're also there to, help with engineering advice and kind of connect really the dots between the FinOps side and the more technical side. So, you can't rely on just FinOps practitioners, or you can't just rely on technical people to be successful in FinOps. You really need a blend of lots of different skill sets and,
Yeah,
and people.
absolutely. And you mentioned that you have a cloud cost solution. Is that like a third party solution, or is that something you built in-house, or maybe it's the built-in solution of the cloud providers?
But yeah, I think we use all three tools, right? So we certainly use a third party provided cloud cost tool. We definitely use the ones that are, built into the cloud providers. And I think the FinOps space is an area that the cloud providers have done a phenomenal job in the last year or two on really releasing a ton of features that, unfortunately for lots of small startups have kind of, they've looked at what they're doing and they're like, well, we're a big company, certainly we can do this. So, we try and be cloud service native as much as we can. And there's also tools we built in house on Splunk or other type tools that we use for kind of financial modeling, reporting, dashboards. So we don't really limit ourselves to one tool. We kind of take the best of what every tool has to offer and use it that way.
Okay, that's great. Listen, Zach, I have so many other questions because you said so many interesting topics and we got already amazing golden nuggets. But I also really want to make sure we have some time to talk about you and get to know you better. So let's get back to the second part of the episode today and learn about you. So, Zach, you live today in the Denver area, right?
Yes, yep, Denver, Colorado. I grew up, spent most of my kind of elementary, high school, college life in Ohio, and right after graduation, my now wife at the time and I decided we want to try a major city. We were sick of Ohio, and Chicago was kind of the next closest big city, which neither of us had ever spent much time in. But we gave it a shot, and we thought maybe big city life would be the permanent life for us. And then 7 8 years or so after living in the city, we really liked it. But I had a job opportunity out in the Denver region, so we thought let's pack up and move. And now I can't picture myself really living anywhere else other than Denver, Colorado.
Nice. What do you like about Denver besides the views and the ski?
We get 300 plus days of sunshine a year, and it's absolutely fantastic to be kind of in a culture where people appreciate the outdoors. Every city's got parks and open spaces and restaurants that are dog friendly. So those are the kind of things that I like to do outside of work is spend time exploring the outdoors with my wife and our dog. So Denver, Colorado really offers those opportunities for us.
Denver is absolutely beautiful. It's amazing. I definitely get you here. And Zach, I would like to get now a recommendation for you on a book or a movie. I have a feeling you'll give us a good one.
Oh, yeah, I've got one. So kind of what really like sparked my interest in really wasn't even FinOps at the time, but if you look at what the book is about, it was really about a cost anomaly detection that couldn't have been attributed to anybody. So the book's called The Cuckoo's Egg. It's came out in the early 90s, late 80s, and it's about a guy who found 74 cents of unallocated spend on a mainframe, and it turned out to be like a international cyber hunt for like a nefarious hacker. This is pre-intrusion detection. This guy kind of invented honeypots and all sorts of things. So it really, I guess, is the exciting part about it is like how much investigative work can really go into like an unallocated spend or an anomaly. So it really like sparked my passion and interest for like systems administration, digging through logs, talking to team after team, chasing things down. So that'd be a book I would recommend, and it's really about the hunt for how a hunt for an anomaly can turn into something you never ever expected.
Isn't that sound like a basic or fundamental book that any FinOps person should read?
Yeah, yep, and it's better than a normal, boring business book filled with technical corporate jargon and power quotes.
No, it sounds great. Our listeners should definitely go to the closest library to their house and get the cuckoo's egg. That sounds really fascinating. Uh, and Zach, like, why do you like to do outside work for fun?
Yeah, I mean, I work in such a technical role outside of work. It's like, how can I unplug and go to somewhere where there's no cell phone service, there's nobody pinging me on Slack, there's no emails, and just kind of unplug and just embrace the outdoors and beauty of being outside and kind of trying to connect back to nature as best I can. That way I'm recharged, and when I'm at work, I can be 100% focused on work because my job can take a lot of brain power and a lot of patience some days.
Amazing, amazing, Zach. And Denver is amazing, and the outdoor there is an amazing. I have to admit, I've been to the city. I've never been to the outdoor around it, but it's definitely on my bucket list. So I definitely hope to get there soon.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to take you out on a mountain and we can talk some FinOps while you're trapped on a chairlift with me.
It's a deal. It's a deal for sure. Cool. And Zach, again, you shared so many interesting insights and ideas. I'm sure people would love to reach out to you and ask questions. What is the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think the beauty of the FinOps community is everybody is willing to talk about what they do great in their organization or share tips that made them successful. It's kind of the antithesis of a lot of other businesses where people don't want to give up their secret sauce or talk about what makes them successful. But every conference, every webinar, every FinOps practitioner who's on LinkedIn are almost always willing to have a conversation with you and share what works, what doesn't work, what tools are they using, what's cool in the open source community. So yeah, LinkedIn is a perfect place to connect with me.
I agree. And I also agree that that's what makes this community so special. I can tell you, I made a transition from security to FinOps, and it was an absolutely smooth transition thanks to the people who accepted me, who explained me, who taught me, who gave me some advice. So it's an amazing community. And Zach, people like you make this community. So guys, feel free to reach out to Zach. Zach, like I said, there were so many golden nuggets on this episode today, from talking about business value, what business value actually means, and what executive wants to hear, and how to build business reviews around FinOps, and how to build a FinOps team. I think all that is absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I learned a lot, and thank you for joining us today, Zach.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure and our listeners' pleasure for sure. And I also want to thank our listeners and our audience for joining us once again, listening in, enjoying. I'm sure you had fun at least as much as I did. And again, don't forget to tell your friends about the podcast. Zach, thank you again. This has been exciting, fascinating episode of FinOps in Action. Hope to see you all next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with tip detection and remediation tools that drive action.